be ready to debrief. And now I'm trying. So now one Iraqi soldier's dead, multiple Iraqi soldiers wounded, and one of my guys wounded, blue on blue. Dude, it's a freaking nightmare. It's a nightmare. So I spend the next however many hours trying to figure out who is to blame for this. My assumption is someone's getting fired, right? Because you can't have a blue on blue and no one gets fired. My assumption is someone's getting fired. So it's kind of the question is who's getting fired. So I go down the list of like the element leader that was in charge of the Iraqi soldiers. Guess what he didn't do? He didn't keep control of those soldiers and let them go down and leave the limit of advance. The radio man that was in charge of that element that moved positions didn't tell me or anyone else where he's going. He just did it. Shooter shot a guy without doing a good PID. Like, I went down the list and was figuring out who was to blame. And there was something in my gut that felt so disgusted by my thoughts. And I was probably, a half an hour away from when the CO arrived. And I couldn't figure out why I felt so disgusted in this debrief. And it occurred to me like a giant slap upside my head that the reason I felt disgusted is because I was trying to blame people for things that were my fault. Because this operation, like every operation, when you are the senior leader on the battlefield, you're in charge of everything. And every one of those mistakes that happened are because of me. They're because of me. Because I failed as a leader to convey how important it was to pass your location. I failed to convey as a leader how important the limit of advance was. I failed to convey how important it was to keep control of those Iraqi soldiers. Those things are my fault that that's happened. Not any one of those guys. And so when the commanding officer showed up and the command master chief and the investigating officer, and they're sitting there in the room with my wounded guy who's got his head bandaged up. It's Matt Hasby. You know Matt, right?
Matt was my swim buddy in second phase.
So I'm looking at Matt in the back. I mean, it's only a miracle that he's alive, right? He had 50 cal punching through the roof. He's laying there. He drew out his pistol so he could like fend for himself as he got overrun.
Fuck.
So, and I will say, with that moment when I realized why I felt disgusted, I felt so relieved, like, oh, you're an idiot. This is you. And I felt, okay, this is you. This is what you did. You're in charge, you're responsible, and this is what the leader does. And so I went in the room and, I asked that question, whose fault was this? And there was a pretty good moment of silence. And then someone chimed in, well, hey, it was my fault. I did this. And I was like, no, it wasn't your fault. And then the radioman said, no, it was my fault. I said, no, it wasn't your fault.
Your whole team was in there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everyone in Task Unit Bruiser was in there, and the command master chief, and the skipper, and the investigating officer. And I went around the room and asked, whose fault is this? And everybody, whether it was they wanted to blame the Iraqis, whether they wanted to take ownership themselves, everybody was chiming in on whose fault it was. And then I said, no, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. There's only one person to blame, and that person's me. And that is the truth. That is the truth. When you are in charge of a team and something goes wrong, it is your fault. And then I said, and here's some things that we're going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I started talking about time and space deconfliction. I started talking about how we were going to overly signal. We went through some protocols. But that was it.